There are a lot of things that we really strongly support in this budget. In particular, obviously the work around climate change. We've been working to this for a number of years now to be able to secure that funding over a long period of time. The work that Martin is doing on family violence and sexual violence, that's been funded through this year's budget. And also there are gains in terms of the cooperation agreement in every area of the cooperation agreement through this budget as well. I did say in my speech that we would like to go further, and that if the Greens had the ability to write the budget ourselves, we would, I think, take a more transformational view of the fiscal settings and focus more in particular on lifting incomes for everyone at the bottom end, which would give them more choices. There's obviously a lot of really good stuff that helps people in those kind of circumstances, whether it comes to lower household energy bills or lower public transport fares and so on. But ultimately, if you were to just focus on lifting people's incomes, then they would be able to cope with the circumstances that they've got. So that's where we've landed.
2 months of half-price public transport. You must have been hoping for more than that.
Well, when those 2 months finishes, there is going to be half-price public transport for everybody with a community services card anywhere in the country in perpetuity. That is close to a Green Party policy that we've campaigned on for a number of years called the Green Transport Card. And so we're really delighted to see that. We also have as a policy actually that we could afford to extend it to free public transport all over the country. That would be a truly transformational measure. So we didn't get that in this year's budget, but we'll keep pushing for it.
Is there enough in the budget for low-income families? We've got the $350 payment, but beneficiaries, families that already received the winter energy payment.
You want me to take that, James?
Sure.
Should there be more for families?
Absolutely. The Greens are quite clear that lifting the incomes for those in the lowest income households, aligning with the welfare expert advisory group who have put out a clear plan for lifting those benefits in particular, as well as incomes for our essential workers, including nurses and our allied health workers. We know that we cannot achieve long-term enduring climate action without making sure that we're resolving inequality at the same time. We also know that we wanted to see direct support, not just through the child support pass-on, which is something that the Greens have fought for a long time, but that actually we just directly lift especially solo parents' main benefits and main benefits across the board directly. And that's something we've campaigned on for a long time. That's also a health determinant. Now, there are a lot of good health measures in this budget, including for the Māori Health Authority that we campaigned on strong. We want to make sure that that's given the proper resource and authority, that there's a concentration on Māori and Pasifika health providers leading that rollout of primary health care, and especially in rural areas. But lifting incomes for those who are struggling the most and ensuring that we have got a mass load more public and affordable housing should absolutely be seen specifically as a health determinant for any sort of wellbeing health budget as well.
What message do you think the government is sending to low-income families by not including them in this package?
Well, we don't think it's good enough that they haven't been directly included in this. Again, we acknowledge the important difference that extending half-price public transport will make. We acknowledge that making it cheaper for people to warm their homes is also going to be an important bit of tautoko and support for those households, but we very, very clearly would have liked to have seen direct support to those very households who are struggling the most. And the Greens have been very clear. People are trying their best with what little they have. We know it hasn't always been particularly popular to support those struggling households, to support those living in poverty, but that's long past time that has to change. We have to understand that this is about all of us understanding how important it is to see those very households have more direct support.
$40 million for the Maori Health Authority.
Yeah.
Is that enough?
It's actually across all of the different Maori health initiatives. It's actually well over, I think, 150. Oh, we would like more. We would like more, absolutely. But I want to also caution that the Māori Health Authority themselves and Māori health providers are clear that in the beginning we need to make sure there's also capability to even get the work and the commissioning done. So we know that this can only be a start. Over the building years, and as the government directly helps capability to roll work out, we absolutely need to see far more, especially when it is Māori who are disproportionately represented in some of the most harmful health outcomes.
The kick in the guts, though, the government sort of made this, the Health New Zealand has been put up as a transformational promise, essentially, as well as the Māori Health Authority, as an acknowledgement of the issues and the inequity in the system. Isn't this just another example of that inequity?
I think that it's really important that we understand how long it has taken and how many decades people have fought for any sort of Māori Health Authority in the very first place. I think it's really important to acknowledge that step change. And yes, if we are serious about Māori health inequities, we will need to see far more resource. But I am also, again, I do want to emphasise that we need to build up the capability and focus on that, and then in the future years, absolutely I want to see more.
Speaking of building, the Housing Minister suggested some of the changes today could help thousands more first-time buyers, raising the price caps.
Yep.
She says there's enough funding for about 7,000 extra first-home grants, 2,500 more first-home loans every year. What kind of difference, if any, is that going to make to the overall housing crisis or shortage in New Zealand?
Not enough. We welcome that, absolutely. We want to see more people being able to put down roots and own their own home with a bit of stability and security. The Greens right now would have also flicked some support to people who rent, who are over half of the population. We wanted to see rent controls to really stop the increase in rents that we are seeing right now. And can I just say, one of the things, specific rent controls that we know is happening right now is how landlords are hiking up rents in between tenancies without any bit of extra improvement to that property whatsoever, but simply because someone has moved out and the housing market is quite sick at the moment. And so those are the sorts of things that we know would have made much more of a difference. We also wanted to see a massive increase in public and affordable housing. We know that those targets for public housing have not changed, and we would like to see far more of an investment in that area.
With landlords, though, I mean, with inflation being as it is, how can you blame landlords for rising prices after 6 months or a year?
We know that it's actually the market, and the market that has been... We know that we've been treating houses as an investment, and that's the way that the current economic set out, so the current market is geared towards housing being used as a way to build wealth for people who have more than enough. What we want to see is shifting the tools so that houses are actually homes for people to live in first and foremost, that housing is a public good and a public commodity. Those are the levers that we want to see shifting. That includes ramping up the quantity and supply of public and affordable housing, but it also includes a wealth tax and a capital gains tax to start to cool off the way that houses are able to be used to build wealth for people who really don't need any more.
What do you make of the $350 payment? Isn't that a drop in the bucket for low-income families?
Oh, yes, it is. And so while we know any dollar will make a difference, we should be setting our standards and our values around making a credible difference. The Green Party's Poverty Action Plan was, for example, going to lift those weekly extra amounts to, for example, an extra $200 in the hand for people on some of the lowest incomes, including solo parent families. Those are the sorts of increases that we should be seeing in any budget if we are serious about particularly health and long-term sustainability for people.
So you mentioned main benefits. Should working for families have increased this?
Yes, and again, our Green Party policy includes an increase to the in-work tax credit to really support people to actually be able to spend more time at home and not have to work 3 jobs and not have to work 80 hours a week for very little pay just to barely scrape by. And so, yes, we would have liked to have seen more in incomes directly to people.
You mentioned that we can afford to do public transport free for everyone. Do you have a sense of how much that might be? Yeah, anyone?
Go.
It depends on whether we're increasing services as well, but it'd be in the order of a couple $100 million, which is very affordable compared to the amount of money being spent on just a couple of kilometres of expensive urban motorway, which doesn't reduce congestion.
The budget has 477 million for screen grants for overseas film projects, but not any money for free public transport. Does that show Labour's commitment to reducing transport emissions as a whole?
I think the Green Party would have done a lot more to reduce transport emissions if this were a green budget. I just want to acknowledge the great work that our green ministers have brought to this budget, and there are a lot of very specific good green initiatives, but absolutely could do more on climate, could lift, eliminate child poverty, not just lift 14,000 children out of child poverty, could do a lot more for nature. So.
Marama, targeted Māori funding, are you happy with that, with what was given?
Targeted Māori funding across the whole budget.
Whole budget?
Yeah, I absolutely welcome and support, and I know that there has been a lot of work to bring forward and prioritise Māori funding. So, for example, in the family violence, sexual violence prevention work, we've made it really clear that prevention work needs to be led by tangata whenua and mātauranga Māori initiatives. That has never been acknowledged before or funded before. In the homelessness space, as my associate ministerial portfolio, we've got $75 million that includes a ring-fence amount for kaupapa Māori responses and prevention work in homelessness, as well as direct specific support for rangatahi homelessness, something which we have not focused on before either. And I know that again in health, kura kaupapa Māori education, we have seen other targeted Māori health, Māori funding. Absolutely, it's to be acknowledged and celebrated. And of course, again, the Greens would like to see more specifically, including in the area of both climate change, economic justice and environmental protection, a land back fund, a hoki whenua mai fund, for Māori to be able to get our land back, including land held in private ownership and including looking at some of the dock land estates. That's the policy that the Green Party has put out there for quite some months now, since Waitangi Day, and that is the sort of fund that would go not just to economic justice and upholding te tiriti, but also to climate change, kaitiaki responsibilities and environmental protection. Oh, we love Matatini, and Matatini needs to be understood as not just a nice cultural display of the natives of Aotearoa, but this is economic and cultural revival, economic enterprise and initiative for the regions as well. Many of the Matatini teams come from all over Aotearoa. This is Māori excellence. And so, if we have a look at it in comparison with the arts and culture that we've funded in other areas, symphony orchestras and so on, ballet, etc., it's about time that Matatini got brought up to equity with that funding. Thanks everyone. Thank you.